and welcome back to another Cook With Me video. In today's video, we're gonna be focusing on a fall breakfast brunch style. I'm so excited to share this with you. I'm gonna be sharing my absolute favorite pumpkin bread recipe, as well as a delicious dupe for the Cracker Barrel hash brown casserole. If you've never had this, you are in for a treat. It is delicious and very addicting. We're also going to be sharing our family's recipe for sausage and biscuits. That's sausage gravy with biscuits. And I'm so excited to share all of these goodies with you. Might also have to be a mimosa in there while we're enjoying our brunch. So let's go ahead and get started. We're gonna start today by making the pumpkin bread. I'm sorry, I almost said banana bread. That's what I'm so used to making. Now this recipe I have had since I first got married. It's on my little index card here. It is literally so beat up. I've had this forever. In fact, I don't even really remember where I got it. I wanna say maybe I got it from a magazine, but to be honest with you, I don't remember, but it's really old. I'll make sure that I'll have all of the ingredients listed for you down below. I'm gonna go ahead and get that made first and get that in the oven, and then we're gonna make our casserole, so that's baking at the same time, and then we're gonna get started on our sausage gravy. So let's get going. Okay, to get us started today, I am grabbing a large mixing bowl. I get questioned a lot about these mixing bowls. I actually got them on Amazon. Well, I put them in my Amazon wish list and they were purchased by my husband for a Christmas gift. I'll have them linked down in my Amazon storefront for you. They do come with 4 mixing bowls. I love them. Like I stated though, I'm starting with a large mixing bowl, 3 cups of sugar. I just added in the oil. I believe it is 1 cup of oil. And I'm adding in the eggs. So the recipe calls for a cup of egg substitute, which I don't like to use. So I'm using 4 regular eggs. That's the equivalent. I'm going in with a whisk to mix that up really well. Next up, you're going to add in your pumpkin puree. The recipe calls for 1 15-ounce can of pumpkin puree. However, I only had large cans. So what I'm doing is loosely measuring this out in a 1 cup measuring cup to give me approximately 15 ounces. 1 cup is 8, so 2 cups is 16. And I loosely packed it in there, so I'm sure I'm around 15. Also calls for, 2/3 of a cup of water. I did use water from my refrigerator, so it's filtered. I do have well water and I'm not really crazy about how it tastes, so I always try to use water from my refrigerator. Then you're going to grab another bowl and you're going to mix your dry ingredients here. So for this recipe, you're going to need 3 cups of flour. I'm using a 1/2 cup scoop, so it'll appear like I'm doing a little bit more. I've got 6 scoops there instead of 3, but that's because I needed 3 cups of flour. And then I'm going to add in the baking powder. Calls for 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 2 teaspoons of baking soda. I have a large thing of baking soda here because it's great for 100 different things. And I'm also going to add in the salt. It does call for 2 teaspoons of salt. So just want to make sure you salt it pretty well. That's what helps to bring out all the other flavors in your bread. And then it also calls for seasoning. So our seasonings for this bread is a teaspoon of nutmeg, a teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of ground cloves, as well as a teaspoon of allspice. I was actually out of allspice, so I did skip that part. But I have since gotten more so that I can make more. It did not alter the taste though, I will say. So if you don't have it, don't panic. Next up, go ahead and add your dry ingredients into your wet ingredients. And then again, with your whisk, you're just going to mix that together. Now you don't want to over mix this because it's going to make your bread kind of gummy and a little chewy. You want to keep it really light. This is a pretty wet batter, so don't panic if it feels like maybe it's a little too wet. That's exactly how it's supposed to be. It is an incredibly moist bread, so it does have a pretty watery or soft batter. It's also incredibly delicious, so make sure that you lick the whisk. It is so worth it. Next up, you're going to grab 3 loaf pans and make sure that you give them a good spray so that nothing sticks. And you're going to divide your batter into the 3 loaf pans. Now, these are around 7x3 loaf pans, I think. The one in the middle was a gift that I got for Christmas. It's my absolute favorite baking item. However, the other 2 are ones that I've had forever. And you just want to make sure you get all of the batter. Although I did leave a certain amount left over in the bowl for the rest of us to enjoy because it is so very delicious. But just go ahead and make sure that you scrape out as much as you possibly can. And as you can see there, I made quite a mess. So once I get these kind of flattened out, I'm going to grab a paper towel to clean off my loaf pan here so it doesn't burn and smoke in the oven, because that does not smell very nice and I don't want that to get into my bread. Go ahead and pop this into your oven again at 350, and you're going to need to bake it for around 45 minutes. Just check it around 45 minutes, and if you need to, put it in a little bit longer depending on your oven, anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. Now we're going to get started on our hash brown casserole. This is seriously such a staple in my house. My family loves this. You're going to start off with 32 ounces of frozen hash browns. You're going to make sure that they have sat out and thawed a little bit, so you don't want them, to be frozen. I also have a garbage bowl there. Don't panic. I wasn't tossing leftover scraps into the same bowl as the hash browns. It's actually my garbage bowl. And I am cutting half of an onion. You're going to dice this up and add this to your hash browns. Now, you don't need to saute your onion. It will bake in the oven. However, if you don't like a ton of onion flavor, you can saute this first, or you can completely omit this part, use a little bit of onion powder to get the same flavor. But we love the onion in this recipe. It's so delicious, and it just adds such a depth of flavor to your hash brown casserole. If you like onion, do not skip this part. It is very, very worth it. Now you're going to add in 1 stick of melted butter, so 1/2 cup of melted butter, and you're going to salt this up a bit. It's up to you how much you put in. You can always go back and add more. And now you're going to add in 1 can of cream of chicken soup. So go ahead and open this up and get that in there. This is what gives it its signature flavor. So 1 can of cream of chicken soup without any water or anything, because you're going to be adding in some other items of seasoning here. You're going to also add in some sour cream. That's what I'm opening now. So the recipe does call for a cup of sour cream. So that is what I'm adding in, is about a cup. I think it's a cup. Maybe it's 2. You have to check the recipe. It might be 2 cups. Go ahead, or maybe even a cup and a half, but go ahead and stir that all together. Try not to make the mess that I made. I was just a little overzealous and my mixing bowl was slightly too small. But I do love this mixing bowl because it's nice and deep. And typically it's the perfect size, but this was more than I remembered. So go ahead and give that a good mix. Make sure that everything is combined to the best of your ability before you add in the next ingredients. We're going to season this up a little bit more, but you're just want to combine that soup and the sour cream as much as you can before you move on to the next parts. Make sure that your onions are all mixed in, and keep scraping the sides so that you're not missing any of your hash browns. And this is going to be so good, you guys, I promise. My secret ingredient, of course, to anything is a little bit of Lowry seasoned salt. So I add a little bit of that and top it off with some freshly ground pepper and give it a really good mix, and your potato casserole is ready to go into the oven. So I'm going to make sure that those last seasonings are completely combined, and I'm actually completely forgetting the biggest ingredient, and that is the cheese. I forgot that we have to add that in. So I'm gonna cut about enough to get us about 1.5 cups of grated cheddar cheese. Now, if you're new to my channel, I always use Cabot Vermont sharp cheddar cheese. It's absolutely delicious. So even though this is white, it is a sharp cheddar. It is my favorite cheese. It has a really great bite to it. It's salty. It's so delicious. So if you've never had this, I would highly recommend it. I know there's a lot of people who love Tillamook cheese, but this honestly is 100 times better than Tillamook cheese. It's so delicious. Hopefully you can find it in your area, but again, Cabot Vermont sharp cheddar. So you're going to need about 1 cup to 1.5 cups of a shredded cheddar. It's really up to you. If you like a little more, a little less, you can adjust. This is not baking. It doesn't have to be a perfect science. You just want to make sure you give it really good flavor. And the cheese is just going to help it be bubbly and melty and oh so good. So give that your final stir. Make sure that all of your ingredients are completely combined. I keep scraping my spoonula here so that way, I'm not preventing anything from stirring together. And your potatoes are starchy, so your hash browns, so things might stick a little bit. So just make sure that you are, giving them a really good stir. Next up, grab yourself your favorite casserole dish. I'm using this 9x13 casserole dish that I got from Target. It might not be 9x13, maybe 12x7. It's a little bit smaller, but I did get this at Target from the Threshold line. It was only $15, which I thought was a great price for a good piece of bakeware. So it's actually stoneware, which is really great. So I did spray it down just a little bit before adding in our casserole. And finally, I'm just going to top it with a little bit more black pepper. I like a lot of black pepper on my food. And now we're going to take it over to the oven and we're going to pop it in with our bread, again at 350. You're going to bake this for about 45 minutes, the same as your bread. While that's cooking, we're going to get started on our biscuits and gravy. I'm starting with a saute pan here on the stove with about 1/2 stick of butter. We're going to let that melt and get warm and bubbly. And while that is melting, I am going to dice up the other half of our onion. And we're going to saute this for the base of our sausage gravy. Now, there's lots of different ways and lots of different recipes to make biscuits and gravy. However, this is my adaptation of my husband's family's recipe. So they do their biscuits and gravy a certain way. This is my adaptation of, their version of that. So we're going to start by sauteing this half an onion, making sure that they get nice and translucent and delicious and sweet. This is the best way to start any kind of gravy or any kind of sauce. I love to put onion in pretty much anything. It really does just add a depth to your food that you're cooking. It just is so very delicious. So if you're not used to adding sauteed onion or onion into things, I would highly recommend it because it is so good. While the onion is sauteing, we're going to go ahead and get our biscuits onto our sheet. Now, here's what's up, guys. This is where I cut some corners. I am all about keeping things simple and yet super delicious. So I go the semi-homemade way. I could make some homemade biscuits, but that was not going to happen. I wasn't rolling anything out and all that good stuff. So these are perfectly great. These are the Pillsbury Grands biscuits. These are the ones we always use, and they get pretty big and they're delicious. So I'm just spraying down this pan, even though it says you don't have to. I always do. And we're going to get these prepared to go in the oven. That way we can do one at a time so that they're not crowding the space, and we'll be ready to enjoy these when our gravy is done. Once our onions are done being sauteed, as you can see here, we're going to get started with our roux. So a roux is just butter and flour that you've cooked for a minute or two that you're going to use as a thickening agent for your gravy. So as you see here, I added 2 tablespoons of butter and I'm just giving that a good stir. You're going to let that cook for a minute or so. It is going to thicken up and turn into a bit of a paste, but you just want to cook it for about a minute or so that way it cooks out that starchy flavor. Then you're going to add in 2 cups of whole milk. You could use skim or 2% if that's your jam. We use whole milk here in this house because that's just how we roll. And I'm using a spatula to just kind of break up our pasty roux, and we're going to allow this to thicken. Put your stove down to like a medium low and just let that simmer for a little while. It will start to thicken as you go. We're also going to season it up with some freshly ground pepper, of course. I just finished telling you how much I love freshly ground pepper. And we're also going to add in a little bit of garlic powder and just a touch of onion powder as well. While that's cooking, we're going to start on our sausage. So I'm using 2 pounds of regular Jimmy Dean breakfast sausage. You can use whatever kind you would like. You could even use a turkey sausage if you prefer, but this is what we're using. And again, I'm making a lot because there's 7 of us. However, you don't have to make this much. You could just go with 1 pound of the breakfast sausage if you prefer. I'm using a meat I don't know what you would call that, meat grinder, I don't know, that tool first just to kind of break it up, and then I'm using a wooden spatula, and then I did just kind of prop the lid on top there so it doesn't splatter on my backsplash. And as you can see, our gravy on the other side is thickening up and getting, perfectly delicious for us to add in our sausage. And while that's cooking up, I'm just going to go ahead and put some items away, clean up a little bit. And just like that, our sausage is almost all the way done. Once it is done, we're going to go ahead and add this to the gravy pan. So I'm not actually going to drain this. I'm just going to use a slotted spoon to drain as I go, add it to our gravy, and then I'm going to give it a taste and just season it as needed. Like I mentioned, I'm going to add a little bit of onion powder and garlic powder and a bit of salt, and it's going to be ready to go. So as I'm stirring up my gravy, I'm noticing that it's a little bit thick, so I'm going to add in some more milk. This is something you can do after the fact. Try not to add too much at the beginning because you can't thicken it back up once you have it all mixed together. You can't add more flour. It will just get cakey and it'll taste really starchy. So don't add flour after the fact. Make it thicker and then you can thin it out versus the other way around. So I'm just adding in a little bit of milk until it makes it, thin enough to spread across our biscuits like a gravy. And that's how my husband prefers it. He likes it a little bit more on the gravy side versus a thicker side. So that's what we're doing here. And because I added a bunch more milk, I'm just going to season it up a little bit more, like I said, with onion powder, garlic powder, salt, and pepper. And this bad boy is ready to go and looks so delicious. Just like that, it's time to take out our delicious hash brown casserole. It was bubbly and crispy on the edges and just absolutely perfect and ready to be devoured. Our pumpkin bread was also done, so I took that out. in just a second here. And while I was about to take that out, I popped in our biscuits, and we're going to do one sheet pan at a time. That way we're not overcrowding the space and it'll be good to go. I'm also giving our gravy another stir, just letting it thicken up a little bit after we added more milk. And then we're going to turn the heat off and let that just kind of sit while we finish up some other things. We're also going to make some scrambled eggs. We like a lot of scrambled eggs here in my family. I grew up eating a lot of eggs. My grandfather worked in an egg ranch in Southern California, and he always had like, I don't know, 3 or 4 dozen eggs in his house at a time. And I just grew up enjoying eggs in all different ways. And I like for my family to enjoy them as well. They're such a great source of protein. So I'm just adding them to a bowl here. Usually if I'm doing like a big Sunday breakfast or so, I usually make a dozen eggs for us because there's so many of us and we usually have extras, but extra people. So that's what I'm making here. I'm just doing a whole dozen eggs. I'm going to give them a really good stir and whisk and just kind of whisk some air into them. Also going to add a little bit of salt and pepper. That's how we like our eggs. And then we're going to season them up a little bit more towards the end. Now, I don't add any other kind of fluid to mine. I don't add water or milk or anything like that. I don't like them too watery. I like them really fluffy, but it's up to you. You could always add something else if you like. The key to a good egg is low and slow. So keep your stove on really low and just constantly scrape the bottom, and use like a soft spatula like I was using before, like a rubber spatula, and you're just going to scrape the bottom, and that's what's going to allow for your eggs to be nice and fluffy. So if you see, I am just scooping across the bottom there, and I added some more of that cheddar cheese onto the top here. It just makes it absolutely delicious. You can skip that part. That's how my family likes it. We think it's really delicious, but that's up to you if you want to add cheese or not. Be very, very mindful of not overcooking your eggs. Eggs will burn very quickly, so if you notice that they're starting to really set up, turn off the heat and you can just let the heat of the pan finish cooking them. That's typically what I do. So I've turned it off here. My pan is nice and hot. As you can see, everything is steaming, and I'm just going to let those finish cooking by sitting there on the stove. Now I'm going to go ahead and start prepping things for us to eat. I'm going to add my gravy into this gravy boat here, which ended up actually not really working out the way I wanted it to. The gravy did thicken up a lot, so we did end up just kind of spooning it on top of our food. It didn't really pour out of the gravy boat, but it still looked pretty and felt a little fancy, which is always nice. I also grabbed a platter here to put our biscuits on for everybody to enjoy. Not everybody adds gravy to their biscuits. Some people just come for the casserole and add a little jelly to their biscuits. It's up to them. We're also going to dish up our eggs into this bowl. That last platter that you saw in this bowl here, the last platter is from Walmart. This one is from Target. I try to just pick these up, maybe 1 or 2 a month. That way I just have them. It's always good to have a lot of serving dishes. You never know when you're going to need them. And it's much more affordable to grab one, when you're shopping versus several at a time. Now I'm going to dish up our pumpkin bread. So remember, this recipe makes 3 loaves. And what I will say is that my family went through all 3 loaves in one whole day. Everybody loves this for breakfast, for a snack, and for a late night treat. It's absolutely delicious and so very moist and yummy. So I'm going to give this a good little slice. We're going to get it plated up on this other platter, and it's going to be time to eat. Okay, my friends, our fall brunch is ready to go. I've got my plate all plated up here. I've got my biscuits and gravy along with my cheesy scrambled eggs and the hash brown casserole, which is to die for, as well as my pumpkin bread, which I festively put in this little pumpkin crock. I like mine with butter on it, so that's up to you. And then I also have my mimosa ready to go. I did use a sparkling wine versus a champagne. This is a sparkling prosecco. It's really, really delicious, so that's up to you and what you like. Some people don't like champagne, it gives them a headache, so maybe try this sparkling wine. But let's go ahead and have a good taste. I definitely am starting with the hash brown casserole because it's my favorite. It's cheesy and oniony and delicious. Let's go ahead and try our biscuits and gravy. Now, full disclosure, I don't normally make this. This is normally Danny's job. I think I did pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and wash it down with a little sip of my mimosa. So good, so bubbly. And now let's go ahead and try our pumpkin bread. This is the most moist pumpkin bread I've ever had. I think it's because it calls for a large amount of oil and a lot of egg, and so it keeps it really, really moist on the inside, but it is absolutely delicious. That butter is melted and soft on the top, so. All right. That brings us to the end of this video. My family has literally come in here probably 10 times asking when breakfast is done, so I've got to be done with this filming and let them eat. I hope that you enjoyed this fall brunch cook with me video. This was fun, and this is something we would make on a weekend morning. It's absolutely delicious, so I hope that you give it a try. If you do, make sure that you tag me on Instagram at Charlotte Grove Farmhouse, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Happy eating.